So, my people, so we just had a hurricane go through Florida, Hurricane Ian. Of course, Florida is a very popular location for short-term rentals. To start short-term rentals, that's actually where I started my first short-term rental. So, when you're starting when you have a short-term rental in a market where the property will be subjected to hurricanes, if you're along the coast, close to the water, that's something that you need to consider um, when thinking about getting into that type of market. Now, of course, that market, uh, uh, beach beachfront property or property that is close to the beach. My property is only 5 minutes from the beach, a 5 minute drive, less than a mile from the water. Um, those properties are very profitable. They're very profitable, but you do have to be concerned about the, I would say, inevitability of a hurricane from time to time, particularly in Florida. That's something that you'll have to you have to determine whether or not the risk is worth the reward. Now, how do you determine that? So, me personally, like I said, my house that I have in Florida is less than a mile from the water, but the way it's situated, it's not right on the water, obviously, because it's, well, maybe not so obviously, but it's uh it's not right on the water. There's between the beach, like it's near the Gulf, between the beach on the Gulf side and my house. There's what you call a barrier island that aids in that, as the name implies, acts as a barrier between the beach and the mainland. So that means that when a hurricane does come in, there's storm surge. That storm surge has to get over the barrier island before it can get to the mainland. So since my house um, is on the mainland, not on the barrier island, but on the mainland, there's that kind of like buffer in between. The way my house is situated, uh, it's a little more protected from the storm surge that come with hurricanes. Now, a house that's on the barrier island, that's not the case. You know, they're not a lot more vulnerable to storm surge. And so, me personally, um, I don't think I would acquire a property that's on the barrier island, just because number one, it's going to be hard to. What would be number one? Number one, uh, yeah, it's going to be hard to get insurance on that property. There are some properties in Florida that are close to the coastline that it's almost impossible to get insurance on right now. So if you were to invest in that type of property, you'd have to self-insure pretty much. So you'd have to go in there and put whatever money you need to put down to get into that property to get it running. And then in the occasion of a hurricane, where you sustain damage, you'd have to be prepared to come out of pocket to fix that house, get that house back into good shape on your own. So because of that, I wouldn't get a property that's right on the water, um, like literally beachfront property. I wouldn't go for those unless I just had a lot of disposable income. If I had a lot of disposable income, if I could pay for the house in cash, and I thought that the house would be so profitable that it would be worth the risk. Maybe I would do it then, but I'm not in that scenario. I'm not in that situation right now, so I wouldn't get a house that's right on the water. Um, but if you can get a house, but even if you get a house that's not right on the water, that's say a few miles inland, you're a little safer. You are a little safer because you won't be subjected to the storm surge that a house right on the water would be subjected to. So you're a little safer there. Also, you'll it's more likely that you'll be able to get insurance. I'm able to get insurance on my house, even though my house is less than a mile from the water. I'm able to get the insurance on my house with no problem. And those properties are still going to be profitable. Those properties that are a few miles inland, where you can get to the beach within a less than a 30-minute drive. The most profitable ones are where you can get to the beach in 15 minutes or less. So So yeah, when we're looking to get into that market or that type of market on the coastline, uh, number one, one of the things you want to consider is um, uh, the risk versus reward when it comes to the eventual hurricanes that you're gonna have to deal with. Now, since I've owned that house, and even before I owned it, when I rented it, um, it's gone through several hurricanes and several tropical storms, and fortunately, I've never sustained any major damage. It's all been minor damage that could be easily repaired. Didn't have to go deep in the pockets, and I think that's because of how my house is situated. Even though it's less than a mile from the water, it's situated in on a circle, on the inside of a circle, not a cul-de-sac, but a circle. It's on the corner of the inside of a circle, and it's kind of protected from. Um, it's kind of protected from because of the way it's situated in the neighborhood. It's like the other houses on the outside of the circle shielded from the wind. In the what? Let me see. I got into the house in 2003. Since 2003, you know, with all the hurricanes and tropical storms that have come through, I've only lost maybe a few shingles off of the roof. In that amount of time, that's been since 2003, so it's almost 20 years. I've only lost a few shingles off of the roof that were easily replaced, and I got the roof. I have a new roof on there now that's rated to withstand, I believe, 120,000, not 120,000, but 120 mile per hour winds. Um, and so, unless I have a major hurricane come through, um, that's more than 120. That comes with more. That comes with winds that are more than 120 miles per hour. I feel like I'm in pretty good shape. I feel like I'm in pretty good shape. But like I said, um, through all the hurricanes and tropical storms that house has been through, I haven't sustained much damage. So I feel like for that particular house, the risk is worth the reward. And even if a hurricane did come through and I did um, I did take on a significant amount of damage, I do have insurance. It's not one of those houses that are not insurable. And even though there's a high deductible, like as is the case for most insurance policies down in Florida in that area that are close to the water, even though there's a high deductible, I still believe that the risk is worth the reward because I believe the deductibles, like for hurricanes, I believe the deductible I have on my policy is about $3,000, something like that. So given how profitable that property is, given how profitable that property is, $3,000 is nothing to put up in the event that I need to file an insurance claim. It's really nothing really. So the potential for hurricanes when contemplating getting into a short-term rental market near the coastline, the potential for hurricanes can be a deterrent, but I would not. I definitely would not rule it out. You just have to do a proper assessment to see if the risk is worth the reward. Like in my case, I believe the risk is worth the reward. Now, ironically, I would say um, since I turned that house into a short-term rental, hurricanes have actually made me money. Believe it or not. And so how's that? Well, when hurricanes hit nearby, but not let's say when hurricanes hit that the house there on the Gulf is in the panhandle of Florida. Let's say a hurricane hits in Tampa or close to Tampa or in Louisiana out to the west. People evacuate those areas. They evacuate those areas, and there have been at least, let me see, one, two, three, at least three times, maybe four times where there were hurricanes within hurricanes that hit within a 3-hour drive of my house, where people were evacuating, and they evacuated. I got evacuees coming to my area and renting my house. I had one when Hurricane Michael came through. I remember when Hurricane Michael came through. I think that was the second year that I had this short-term rental open. Was it the second year? I have to go back and look. But when Hurricane Michael came through, it hit Panama City directly. Panama City is driving. It's about an hour, 15 minutes, hour and a half east of where my house is, and Panama City got beat up very bad, pretty bad. So after Hurricane Michael came and went, first of all, even though it was only an hour and a half east of my house, I didn't sustain any damage. I lost power for like a day and a half or something like that. But the day after the hurricane hit, people were already trying to book my place. People were already trying to book my place the day after the hurricane hit. Who were these people? There were people who were in Panama City who sustained damage and they needed a place to stay. There were people first responders coming down to help with the restoration efforts. Contractors coming down to help with the restoration efforts. They were coming down to rent, and they were coming down and needed a place to stay. And in the case of the first responders, they didn't even care that I didn't have power that first day. They said they'd bring a generator. They would send me an email or send me a message and ask if I sustained any damage. I said no, but I didn't have power, and they didn't care that I didn't have power. They just because they said they would bring their own generators and they want to rent anyway. So for Hurricane Michael, I believe it was first I got a renter. It was one of the first responders, if I remember correctly, one of the contractors coming down to help with the restoration efforts, and they booked the place for a month. And then after that, I got a military family from Panama City, whose house was in bad shape because of the storm, and they stayed for, I believe it was 3 months. 3 months. So in that case, again, the hurricane brought me business. There was another case where a hurricane was barreling down on New Orleans, and people were evacuated from New Orleans. And I got a family from New Orleans that rented my house for, I believe it was a week. Like I said, that's happened 3 or 4 times where a hurricane came to the area or within a few hours of my area, and I made money off of it because people who were evacuating needed a place to stay. So I thought that was quite ironic, I guess is the word, making money off of a hurricane coming to the area. So again, if you want to get into a market that is near the coastline, a coastline where an eventual hurricane may approach, that is something you have to think about. You have to weigh the risk and the reward. In my case, I think that the risk is worth the reward. Since having the house, since I first got in the house in 2003, all the way up until now, there have been several hurricanes, several tropical storms, and I haven't sustained much damage at all. The most damage that I saw in the house was before I bought it. The most damage that I saw from a hurricane in the house was before I bought it, when I was renting it. That was in 2005, I believe, when Hurricane Ivan hit. And even that damage was just, it wasn't very much. Lost a few shingles off the house. The fence blew down. The post on the back porch got snapped in half, and then there was some water damage in the garage. But it wasn't anything major. It may have cost a total of $3,000 to get everything repaired. So for me, the risk is worth the reward. If you're right on the water, like beachfront property, you have to think a little bit harder about it, because number one, you might not be able to get insurance. So you have to self-insure, and that can get quite expensive. Especially if the house is a total loss. If the house is a total loss and you have no insurance, that means if you're gonna get the property back to a profitable state, then you have to put up the money. You have to find the money somehow. And those beachfront properties are expensive. They're very expensive. So if you drop, let's say, $500,000 on a beachfront property that you can't get insurance on, that's quite risky. That's quite risky because if a hurricane comes and blows it away, let's say it takes $500,000 to put it back. I mean, you're in the hole. You're in the hole. Now you make a lot of money off those beachfront properties. You make a lot of money off of those, but not $500,000 a year. I would probably say on a beachfront property like that, you might profit depending on how big the house is. Let's say you have a beachfront property that's 3-4 bedrooms and can accommodate 15 people. I would say you could probably make a profit of. You could probably count on a profit on that house, and just depending on how much your mortgage is, whether it's paid off or whether you have a mortgage, you can probably count on a profit of $50,000. I would say anywhere from $50,000 to $75,000. I know that's a significant range, but I would say depending on the property, how fancy it is, you can probably count on a profit of $50,000 to $75,000 on a beachfront property, like right on the beach. You can probably count on that. So let's say it's on the high end, $75,000 profit on that one house. And then a hurricane comes, it's not insured, then a hurricane comes and blows it away, or a hurricane comes and blows it away. And it costs you $500,000 to put it back. It's a $500,000 house. It costs you $500,000 to put it back. I think that's too risky. So I myself would not take that risk on a property like that, unless I had a lot of disposable income where it just didn't matter. Like I have millions to throw around. I'm not at that point yet. So since I'm not at the point where I have millions to throw around yet, I won't be getting beachfront property. So anyway, that'll wrap this video up. Just to summarize, beach properties near the coastline are very profitable. But there are risks to consider. One of the main ones being hurricanes. So do your research before you dive in. Till next time, talk to you guys later.